Good morning, everyone.
Good
My
morning.
name is Jinko Goto, and I'm currently producing at Netflix an animated feature, and I'm delighted to moderate this wonderful group of ladies here that bring a lot of diversity and from around the world. So I would like to go ahead and introduce Reya Fisher, our first panelist who will be speaking. Reya, do you want to give us a little bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, I started out in programming and then worked in the film industry for a long time on pipeline and then eventually virtual production pretty much continuously at Universal, at Sony Imageworks on the Zemeckis movies and things like that. You know, a lot of freelance consulting at Fox VFX Lab and now most recently at Netflix.
Thank you, Reya. Christina, let's talk about your background and how you got into virtual production.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having us, Jinko. I feel very fortunate. I've had a unique blend of live action, animation, XR experience. My background comes out of live action production and producing. I've produced from features to documentaries to digital series. And I most recently was at DreamWorks. I headed the advanced creative technology team, and we focused on AR, VR, XR, virtual production. After I left, I started my own shingle called Asher XR, and with the efforts to really focus in on both XR content and just pathways to being a bridge for virtual production, since I have that blend of live action and emerging tech. I also help with content creation for Positron. And just to add to that, I'm currently producing a feature. I'm in Vancouver right now, and it's been exciting to see what's happening, how we're moving forward on things COVID-wise, but also taking away the things that we've done in traditional production and how do we apply that best in virtual production. So we're trying to also implement some things for virtual production with this feature.
Thank you, Christina. And heading over to Eve Roth, who's a recent graduate. So tell us about how you got started into virtual production.
Yeah, so I'm a recent grad from Pratt in Brooklyn, and I got started in virtual production kind of through women in animation. I got to work for Netflix with Rhea and Jinko, and most recently I'm now working for a company called Parallax to help develop a short film in Unreal using real-time technology. So,
thank you, Eve. And moving over to Lorna from the UK, welcome. Tell us how you got started into virtual production.
Thank you, Jinko. Thanks for inviting me to this panel. I'm really excited about this conversation, particularly as a new entrant into this space. My background is traditionally visual effects, which I've been doing for over a decade now, mostly in the facilities like MPC, and also spent some time out in New York looking at commercials and films, visual effects. So I'm trying to bridge this conversation between what's traditionally going on in visual effects and looking at the new opportunities that lie out for us in virtual production.
Thank you, Lorna. And our last panelist is Marina. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi. I love that there's so much overlap. So much like Christina, I come from the physical production side of things. I'm originally from Brazil, grew up in Switzerland, so I actually started making documentaries for the United Nations and then moved into the narrative world. And I've been producing everything from features to web series to TV as well. But recently took a detour into this world by being the VFX production supervisor on Call of the Wild, where we did a lot of work at the Fox Lab that Rhea was at, and MPC was our VFX vendor for the entire movie. Really, for me, my entrance into this world is really how to tie physical production and and virtual production, and really try to bring people that have that might be a little resistant to virtual production from the physical production world, and see if we can marry this and bridge the gap.
Great, thank you. So I want to dive in and talk about how do we define virtual production, because I know the terminology has evolved over the years. And so just wanting to open up to this panelist, and how would you define virtual production today?
Oh, I think we're all laughing because that's a hard question. I'd say from my point of view as a very early entrant, I am working as a senior visual effects producer at Dupe and head of production, and we are looking into the opportunities that sit within virtual production. So getting up to speed on the Unreal Engine and looking at where we can place our skills and the values that we have within the companies and align them with the needs of our clients. So for me, virtual production sits within an idea, a concept, a method, and a means to deliver these types of content for clients to our audiences. So it's more about the methodology of virtual production coming together and collaborating than the actual verticals that sit within virtual production, which are so broad and like ever increasing at this stage.
That's great, Lorna. Sometimes I say to people that virtual production is really more like a choice between waterfall or agile process on a project. It's not really a particular thing. In the early days, it was sort of like, how do you simulate cameras on set? And then it became, well, once you could do that, then it was a question, how's it related to previs? And it's really all shooting, and it's not always on stage. And then it's got kind of like smeared out like peanut butter,
Yeah, I would add, it's really the place where it sits, where you have your live action set, and you're taking those elements, the digital elements that allow for that blend to happen. It doesn't necessarily have to be fully in camera for it to fall into virtual production. Like that's the only definition. I think there's lots of amazing things that we've already had in the defining worlds of virtual production, from previs to tech viz and the visualization process. I think there's a lot of hybrid kind of green screen that falls within the virtual production umbrella, but it for a lot of use cases that will be game changers currently and in the future, it's really going to be that blending of the live action, what has been happening on set, and how can we leverage real-time game engine capabilities, assets that we can, push the not only the just what you're going to see eventually on in camera or on final screen, but it will certainly allow us to not have to wait through the very end to really know what we're doing, and that's the hope for like the sort of like the future of production.
Any other thoughts?
Let's see. What we on Call of the Wild, we kind of had a little bit of everything. We had previs, we had tech viz, we recreated the Yukon in Santa Clarita, and which was actually one of the most freeing things. Is our entire movie was supposed to be happening in a very inhospitable environment, and also would take an entire year or so, go through different seasons. And having been able to send a crew both in summer and in winter to the Yukon to completely recreate our environments really just gave us the freedom to do anything that we needed here. So that, that aspect definitely changed everything for us. But we also did a lot of prevising and virtual cameras for things that were entirely dogfights. There's so much flexibility in what can be done, and this gives so much more flexibility to the filmmakers that really, I mean, the blend of physical production and virtual production to me is where you just take out all the limits to creativity.
So for me, having worked both in live action, but have mostly really produced animated features over the last 25 years, what's exciting to me is the ability to do collaborative work that is away from the linear pipeline that we've set up in the CG pipeline. So that to me is really emulating that live action principle that you can have on a live action set, but we're doing it virtually for animated movies. So that to me is really exciting and a game changer, and really bringing the two worlds together. Just want to talk about, how you guys see how the world is coming together with gaming and VFX, live action and animation. Just love to get your thoughts as well.
We're all very polite. I like it. Everyone's a pause to let the others speak, which is a great, pleasant part of being on a panelist of women. So, so I would say that, there's so many amazing things that are happening and unfolding. It tends to be still a little bit siloed. For example, what you were saying, Jinko, with like animation, we're trying to push your assets, push your workflow in game engine so you can see things quicker. And what's exciting is it is across the board, the spectrum of game engine, VFX, and then also ultimately, how does that going to play out in that on-screen kind of look? And what I like about it is that it sort of is blending all of these very specific processes for, let's just say, I'll give the example of live action. You have their development, pre-production, production, post, and then of course distribution. And those things, what's happening is a mindset of collaboration. We actually don't want to wait all the way to the end, for post to deliver and whatnot. And then we're like, what are we really seeing? Or is that final sequence that we really wanted in a traditional VFX fashion going to be what we want? So this is to me, this type of workflow, virtual productions, allowing key creatives, producers, directors, and whatnot, and anyone really to lean in and see. I can actually see a lot more earlier on, and to it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have everything mapped out. It just means that you get to see it a little bit unfold. And I think that part of the creative process is really important. It's very helpful for you to think about things that, oh, wait, can we do it this way or not? With physical production, some of the limitations are truly based around like the actual location. One, you can't find a location. Two, there's restrictions with it, maybe because of COVID, and COVID is going to be a continuous conversation of that. Three, budgetary. And so with virtual production, what's exciting for me is like we could actually build exactly what the director's looking for, what he or she has envisioned, and allow for that to be something dynamic. Again, it's like beyond our imagination. So I think that's really exciting.
Thanks, Christina.
There's the collaboration that you're describing, Jinko, as we did on Escape from Hat when we were working on that. That was really a bunch of us, Eve and the rest of the team, online live in Unreal Engine. And that's an idea that's really catching on, quite strongly right now, because you can have different specialists all working in the same scene. That's kind of interesting though. That's one way of collaboration. Like there are other ways, like on set, that are kind of interesting too. We did a blue screen shoot for a Kids in the Jungle kind of show. This was for Harmony Gold years ago. They do like the fighting things, with the superheroes from Japan. And we were doing a very low budget production, right? We were doing virtual set, camera tracked, and you could see. And what they did was they put all this greenery on the blue screen set, but in the foreground there was like a straight line, where you could see where the blue screen, where the dirt ended and the blue began. And we're all looking at the monitor, and people are saying, "Oh yeah, we'll have to fix that in post and everything else." And while we're saying this, and we're all the tech nerd at the time, bro kind of team, and the woman comes over, here's the greens person, and she just looks at the line on the floor. She goes over and she puts a rock on the blue, and then she kind of like messes up the border line between the blue and the rest. She puts another rock, and she blended it perfectly just looking at the monitor. So that was like an on-set collaboration, bringing of a person who isn't really in the virtual part of it at all. This is just somebody who can see what's going on. So there's a lot of interesting cross stuff that happens there.
Any other thoughts here? Okay, so let's talk about the challenges. I think Lorna mentioned earlier that there's some resistance, but can we talk about what the challenges are in terms of really incorporating virtual production into the future?
I think it's more a case of bringing people along with the whole journey within virtual production, because it's so undefined, and as a result of that, it's trying to learn the language and the vocabulary, and then also be realistic and practical in and around the constraints, as you mentioned, Christina, about the budgets, and looking at where it's really necessary, because the actual piece that's being delivered, the content, is really what we're serving to support, and we want to make sure we're doing that to the best of our ability, and having opportunities and tools such as virtual production techniques can, slightly offset you from the true mission, and you want to make sure that you're not getting derailed from that. So I think in terms of it being a challenge, it's like anything new, getting comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, because there's a lot of test and trial and errors and delight in the things that go well, and sometimes a little bit of frustration when things don't move the way they do, but all in all, we do want to make sure that we are giving to the story, the narrative, to the content. So identifying where it's necessary, looking at constraints, and then also thinking about the solutions that serve the story within the constraints.
I think there's also, the challenge is an educational component. Film is very much a medium of habit. We've done this way for 100 years. Why would we change it? So there's a lot of just getting filmmakers at every level comfortable with maybe changing their processes and understanding what they gain from it. And that becomes maybe rethinking how we do pre-production, and extending pre-production, or at least starting certain people earlier so that they can get comfortable with what can be done here, and then also getting people to understand that extending pre-production on a few people so that you can integrate virtual production into the plan actually ends up saving you money down the line. So changing a mindset that way, I think, is going to be a little bit difficult, but it is getting a director and a DP used to putting on a VR headset and seeing the world and understanding what that technology can give them in terms of flexibility and freedom. It takes them out of their regular processes and the skills that they've already developed, and it does kind of push them into stretching those skills a little bit further. And so I think anytime you're asking people to come a little bit out of their comfort zone, you're gonna encounter resistance. But I do think if we can get enough people, just even in my situation as a line producer, when I get a script to budget, obviously my first thought is purely traditional, right? Like, this is what our standard prep is going to be. This is how we're going to tackle these challenges and so forth. And I love that, having gone outside of my usual realm, now makes me think of like, oh, is there a virtual production approach to this, or a component to it that we can add that could make things better? So yeah, I think the challenge is there's going to be a little bit of time to get enough people on with the program to have that be something that just becomes an automatic consideration when you're starting a project. Like, oh, should we be thinking about this? Is this a project where that is something that can really be helpful, or is this one where it's like, okay, maybe this can be just straight traditional? So I think getting people comfortable with new technologies is usually, it takes some effort.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I think that I've given a talk where, there's the adoption curve. And I think, in an effort to try and really push virtual production and allow more people to do it, I think a lot of it is looking at who are those early adopters that really want to get into it, and they are going to adopt it quicker. They have either an innate ability to see it differently, and they're okay to bleed out from their usual, Hollywood has been built on, tradition of filmmaking. And so, really what it is just, from my stand as a producer, it's like looking at, like, if I'm putting together a project, it's who of the filmmakers, if I do want to do something in virtual production, are those early adopters, where the adoption of it isn't as hard to get them to move away from a traditional mindset. And so I think, those that are interested in that and want to expand that they're from their own experience. I'll give you a great example. You could be location scouting and you're wanting something outdoors, and you're trying to find that exact piece, that exact little section that's going to give you the lighting, and let's say it's a bunch of vegetation or trees or whatnot, and to say, you can still do your scout, but you're not going to have to physically be there. How do you feel about that? Are you comfortable with that? Can you still envision what that's going to look like in headset? And are you comfortable with that? And I think, as all of us are those early adopters, it's like teaming with your early adopters that are okay to move away from a traditional set and be open to, like, I would love that, to entertain that thing. I would love to entertain that new process. So.
Yeah, I see it more as a disruptor than an adopter, in the sense that we want to create a new industry or a new medium and new techniques. And Eve, I mean, you just got out of school, so you have no preconceived notion of any of this. So what do you think are the challenges?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, the production that I got to work on at Netflix, everybody was super into adopting virtual production and seeing the capabilities of that. But I can definitely see that there might be some resistance with people who might think it's maybe cheating, or that they're too stuck in wanting to do it traditionally. But I think that as these softwares develop and get better, I think that more and more people will start to adopt it.
Yeah, I mean, just one more point. Exactly what y'all are saying. It's just what I've seen on set is absolute terror. Like, the first time somebody encounters this technology, like shooting on a green screen stage, and you've got that other monitor that's actually showing you the comp, the live comp through the camera feed. And the first thing that, the jib operator says, we say, okay, well, we're going to give you the feed with the comp. And the jib operator notices that it's, say, 4 or 5 frames behind, live. And so it's a jib operator. They're kind of nervous about that. So we say, okay, we'll give you a second smaller monitor with the comp next to your nice big monitor that has your, your live feed. And then this happened on 2 different productions, like halfway through the show. He would say, "Can you just swap those? Because I'm kind of used to the delay now, and I really like the framing I can do on the comp." So, but the first reaction is like, "Oh, no, that's not what I do," But yeah, they come
We
around.
had that too with Call of the Wild, where our main character is a digital dog, and we had a few scenes that we had a few scenes that we had pre-animated the moves completely to the sets as they had been designed. We LiDAR them, and so all of the animation was endemic to that particular space. And with the NCAM, we were able to feed to the camera operators the animation. So they all of a sudden, rather than having to imagine a camera move and like time it in their heads, like, okay, they're going to move to here, here, and there, they were able to see exactly where the dogs were moving. And at first, they were very resistant to this idea. They're like, "Oh God, you're going to attach something to our camera. It's fine. I've done this for decades. It's all good." And then within 5 minutes, they're like, "Oh my God, this is great." So the initial...
Marina, I think we lost you the last little bit.
Oh, I think we lost her.
Oh, I'm coming back.
Yeah, you're back.
Sorry, guys. Sorry, there are wildfires nearby. I'm sure that's not helping the internet.
So we lost you the last little bit. If you don't mind, just repeat. Yeah, we did.
Okay. No, what I was saying is that we got people who were very resistant to this, and within 5 minutes suddenly saw the value of it. So it's exactly what Rhea is saying, where at first there's panic, and then there's a aha moment of like, okay, this actually is really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think the seeing is the believing part. Once they can see it and see the magic and see the possibilities, like, oh, then they start to like, can you do this? Can you do this? Can we do this? So I think that's exciting.
Yeah, that was also my experience working on Netflix. Is once the director got in there and started moving lights around in Unreal, or started moving the camera around to see their character and then get the mood that they were trying to feel, like the excitement went through the roof. So I think once you get into it, people will understand.
Yeah, there's also a perception, most likely because of virtual production was established in some of these most expensive shows. So how do we shift that so that it can be affordable to all production? And I think it is cost effective if we can think of ways to use virtual production. So I'd like to just share some thoughts there. Yeah.
No, I was just thinking that at the moment, the productions that can afford to utilize virtual production or that are more open to it tend to have the filmmakers that are more established and therefore more resistant. Whereas I would think probably young up and coming filmmakers would be more apt to be early adopters if the cost weren't a barrier to it. I don't know how we bridge that gap. I think we will soon. I feel like it's coming more and more. But I think it is really a matter of trying to educate people on the production side on how something that looks like a big expense up front can save you money on the back end. But yeah, right now we are in that world where the people who have access to it are the most resistant, and the people who are most interested have less access to it. But I feel like the technology is starting to catch up and make it more feasible.
Yeah, definitely with the game engines, right? I mean, Eve, do you want to talk a little bit about the project you're working on now, or you're shooting in?
We're shooting in Unreal. We are taking what was a VR film, and we're going to shoot it 2D. So we're going to have virtual cameras, and we're going to have the DP in there setting everything up, and we're basically going to shoot the short film all in Unreal and try to get final pixel out.
It's awesome.
That's one of the
Yeah,
really
and
cool things. Yeah, go for it, Eve.
well, I was going to say that with even with ray tracing now, the look that you can get straight out of engine is so much better than what it has been in the past. So
It's
Ray,
kind of the
you've been
final.
at this, yeah. Ray, you've been
Oh,
at
that,
this for decades. So I want to hear what you have to say about this. Yeah.
well, it's kind of the last bridge we're trying to jump over. It's just like when we kind of saw the similarity between shooting in previs and shooting on set with these systems and everything, and how they're using a lot of the same hardware and techniques and everything. We were like, yeah, that's really great. But the one hurdle we couldn't overcome was we couldn't really get to final pixel. So that was kind of accepted. So there was this big chunk of metadata that we had to throw over the wall to post. And then post would look at it and say, we can't use this. And then they do the work all over again, which makes that argument, that economic argument, really tough. But the two things that are changing now, we can render so exquisitely that you can put it on the LED walls, right? Or you can potentially and that is going to, in a lot of cases, be final pixel, or like, what Eve was doing on Hat, which was really working. And this is with like furry characters and things, which is not an easy problem. So it was pretty amazing. We were surprised at how far we could get with it.
mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm curious if anybody feels like that's going to be like how the real-time render engines might integrate into the process, for us.
I mean, I can certainly see as the rendering gets better and the ray tracing gets better to really be using real-time engine as a workflow process for animated movie, because it allows everyone to collaborate with the director. Unlike the very linear system we put together in the CG pipeline, which was really based on the traditional animation pipeline. But with virtual production, you can integrate animation, lighting, layout all in one, so that the director can really collaborate with the animation supervisor, with the layout supervisor, the DP, and the lighting director, much like what we do in live action. So I think if we can develop that workflow process, I think it will be very cost effective, and as well gives opportunity for iterations quickly. So to me, that is something that I think will become super valuable, and really will change how we make these animated movies. So I'm going to move on to my very passionate topic, which is opportunities for women. Being Vice President of Women in Animation is all about 50-50 by 2025. So want to hear about what are the opportunities for women in virtual production, and why do you think they exist?
I think with like game engine, for example, I think if someone who's listening to this panel, you can download, there's two big game engine opportunities that people can venture into, Unreal or Unity, and they have an opportunity to just download and start to play around. I think that what's exciting is the opportunity for exploration and just working in it. And we're at a place in time that tools and workflows and software are available. It's just, to encourage those that are emerging and the women, just graduating, or, hey, I was supposed to have an internship and they're not doing internships, set up your own internship where you can just start digging in. And then there's a lot of online support. I know with Epic, they have just a vast amount of videos and tutorials, education. And there's a community out there that would love to support women technologists, women creative technologists. So it's a very exciting time. If I were to look back, I've started my career 25 plus years ago. So it's sort of like, wow, what would it have been if I was starting now? And it's incredible. It's really an opportunity that women have.
I think to piggyback off of that as well is to say that because it's such an evolving and fresh space, that when the rules aren't so specifically defined as yet, it's a great time to make your mark and to blaze a trail for yourself and for women. It's a perfect opportunity to see how you can engage with this type of industry at this particular point when there are very few people who are categorically certain of how everything should be done. So the testing, the playing, the development, the groups, the communities, it's all embedded in this idea of exploration and trying to find souls, which is a perfect time to engage.
I love that category. What did you say? Categorically?
Categorically. Yes.
I would agree too. I think
It's
what's
so
exciting,
true.
I think what's exciting about this workflow, this collaboration, is it's inclusive. And I think that historically, what we faced and what women face every single day as they make their fight to have their place in the industry is that this is I love what you said, Jinko. It's a disruptor. We want to claim this disruption. We want to claim like collaborative, inclusive workspace that people's voices, because it's the pathway is not clear. It is so riddled with opportunity for diversity and inclusion that that's why I get really excited. And I think that, again, like we need to seize the day. So.
And just
And
supporting.
now,
Oh, sorry.
yeah. No, go ahead, Reg.
I was just and just to support what Christina's saying is that the technologies, they're embedded in everything now. Our cell phones have, tracking technology, spatial tracking and cameras and everything. There's so much you can do with that now, just like, messing around at home, and so much you can learn and figure out, and then is completely relevant to what's going on in the industry in so many areas. Yeah, accessibility.
Eve, I'd love to hear why you got involved in this.
Yeah, I actually started using Unreal Engine for my senior thesis. I was halfway through and I was like, I want to do something different. I want to explore this platform. So I switched my whole film over and ended up finishing it and rendering out Final Pixel in Unreal. And then from that, I just learned more about what virtual production was and was able to kind of jump into the Netflix project because of my experience in Unreal. And I really only spent a year studying it and learning it. So it's really easy to get into, and it looks daunting, but once you get into it, you can get very comfortable very quickly.
The other thing
Yeah, I really think this is, sorry.
Go. Please go.
Oh no, I was just going to say that the advantage of this being such a technology-based aspect of filmmaking is that your skill ends up being what truly matters, right? There is always going to still be a certain amount of like contacts and who you know. Unfortunately, that is always going to be the case no matter what. But ultimately, you can be like Eve, who has demonstrated skill and has developed this skill. And when somebody is looking for someone for a project and she can say, hey, look at everything that I can do, you can't deny that.
Yeah.
And you're going to go to the more competent person, because again, we're constantly trying to find efficiencies in the film industry. You're going to go with the person that can deliver it faster and best, so that really does open a lot of doors for anyone who's willing to just develop that skill.
And I think one benefit of COVID is that it's now forced us to all work virtually. So I'm hoping that virtual production also closes the gap of the world and bring the world closer together, that, allows for more diverse voices, because I think that's one of the things that, we're striving for. And how do we do that? And I think virtual production gives opportunities for doing that. So Luna, Lorna, are you working with talent outside of the UK, or are you all pretty much UK based at this point?
We're largely UK based at Duke, but we're obviously open to working and have worked with people all over the world and of varying experience. We're also quite a unique setup. Duke, I believe, is the only B corporation. So we have a lot of values in how we engage with our work and what we do amongst the crew and the staff that we work with, and then also environmentally and then out towards the community. So the innovations that sit in and around doing this work and then building that into the mission that we have to do good, do work better, it's something that we are very much encouraged to do and we welcome. And
Great.
just to add,
yeah, go ahead.
Two quick things. I think another unexplored area of virtual production and the whole idea around this is the redundancy element, looking at how we can take items, assets, and let them live beyond just that one moment. If it's just for the film or the TV, we can translate them into other areas, other platforms, other mediums, and then trying to look at how we reduce waste, time, energy, effort, and skills by taking these components and placing them in other ways, maybe polishing and tidying up. So it's something that I think is going to serve as quite an interesting part of this revealing of how we do things. Like, how do we do things so that they have a longer lifespan? So it's not just for this one time, we put them in the bin or just use them for the show reel or any kind of promo material. How can we use them again in other areas, partner up with other divisions or even industries and see how they can be used again and serve other purposes?
So I think what we'll do is we're going to open up to Q&A. I think we have about 10 minutes left. So if there are any questions, please start typing in and we'll start taking them from the audience.
I see one question that was directed to me that I can answer really quickly.
Great.
It was just,
thanks, Steve.
yeah, it was just about advice for a grad trying to land a job at a studio and what are some tips to get noticed. And I think obviously networking is super huge, and Rhea is a great resource that gives you the platform to meet a lot of people that can mention you to someone else, or they know if someone's looking for someone. So getting connected that way, I think, definitely helps. That's how I got connected to Mark and then to Jinko and Reya. So definitely keeping up with those connections. And also, I think having an online presence definitely helps. Just making sure that you have an Instagram or something that looks really polished and is something that you're proud to show.
I'm being told that there are questions, but I apologize. I am not seeing them.
I can see a few. Yeah, coming through.
Yeah. You have to take that window and make it tall.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't see them either. I was like,
okay, whoever sees a question, go for it, if you don't mind, because I know.
Tell us what the question is. I don't see them either.
So we have a question about being women, and particularly being women of colour, minority women, how that has affected us in the past and how we've overcome those scenarios where that might have been a challenge.
I can start to speak. What's interesting as we are working with a global world, with global talent, is that it's always important to obviously put yourself in the other person's shoes and sometimes that's super hard. I think for me, being a woman of color, especially in technology as well as in live action, I think I'm Chinese American. My parents are immigrants from Hong Kong. So there's a interesting cultural aspect that I face every day that is very different from the world that I face as I'm working with people. So I constantly combat that. There's, in Chinese culture, there's just a way to honor your elders and whatnot. And so if you're in a situation where you're supposed to be leading, then how do you do that? And how do you integrate your background and your just what difference that you bring to the table? So things like that are really interesting. And I think those companies that are really leaning into diversity and inclusion, they're looking at that, like what is the makeup of that person's background, and how does that relay when they start to work with people? So I've faced some of those challenges myself on a personal level, even from leadership, management, and whatnot, and trying to combat maybe my own misunderstanding or unconscious bias.
I think what's great though is that the world is changing, and and everybody in the world is now trying to move the world and the culture forward. So I'm hoping that the lessons we've all learned in the past is that we don't repeat those mistakes, but trying to learn from that past and saying, how do we educate and how do we become better allies so that we can support diversity and deal with racism and gender inequalities that I think is very lacking. But I think, there's an opportunity. And I think what's important is to figure out what is a sustainable model to make that change and get everyone behind it, because I think time is here for that. So we have a couple minutes left. If anyone else have any thoughts here.
I have a small comment I can make about the last topic. This is an angle into it. I did teaching in China for virtual production to some teams a few years ago. And in that situation, I was completely out of the culture, right? But what it took was understanding the context, of the culture, like what were the things that made sense to do, and what would help like get ideas across, things you couldn't do, like you wouldn't say you did something wrong, you might have to talk more, We did these exercises, we'd stand in a circle and we'd speak the problems into the middle of the circle and things like that. And, that way it'd be outside of us. And I came back like 9 months later to do a project and they were still doing these things. So but it started with the idea that both parties really felt that there was value there that they didn't know and that they wanted to be a part of, And one of the great things about the awareness that all of the cultural things that have happened this summer, I think, is that people are getting aware that there's a problem and that there's value and that we're missing out. And, it's what we all hope for, is to help it get better that way.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for participating. And thank you, audience, for listening to us today. And please, if you're not a member of Women Animation, go to womeninanimation.org and become a member. Thanks so much. And thank you, Autodesk, for sponsoring this event.
Bye.
Yes,
Bye.
thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.